I'll call the meeting to order at 6:04. We have the approval of the minutes from the two dates. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from December?
Motion to approve the minutes from December 2nd and December 16th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great, Steve. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No abstentions. Good. Welcome, Kathy. We're just approving minutes, and then, our next couple big, we did have an approved document, and Steve brought up some additions that he might like to add. We would have to have a special meeting for that because we did approve the document. But perhaps, Steve, instead of doing that, I mean, this is ongoing. There's going to be no end. And we've all said, like, this is not by any means complete. Perhaps in the presentation, if we don't want to do it as a special meeting to try and get additions, we can, or in the presentation of it, we can talk about that fact that there's going to be things we find out. Connecticut, in Hartford, they released their police accountability task force work since we've met. The traffic CCM, or the Connecticut traffic people, they're doing a study. So, some of the things are already underway. So, anyway, I don't know, Steve, do you want to talk to the group about this?
Yeah, so to the policing section, this is Steve Bogan. To the policing section, I just wanted to add, and it was reaffirmed, it was just basically a paragraph about the history of Fairfield Police Department and something about the police commission as the ones who oversee the police department. I was in a meeting with the Stratford Police today, and they, if you don't have something about the history of the police department, then you don't have anything. So
there is a section though that specifically says, look at that area, like look at your area, the history of the police department. I mean, it's a specific recommendation with a link to the Fairfield website. To the police
I know there is.
So I don't know if it's warrants. I mean, you guys tell me. We can't vote on it today. Excuse me, because it wasn't on the agenda, so we can't have a voting item because we didn't give enough notice.
The other issue is, so Jamie and I wrote that section, but when we went back to look at it, somebody must have rewritten it because it wasn't.
As we've been saying all along.
I missed it. So whatever. I'm just adding that in the beginning. I'm offering to add that in the beginning, and because we missed it, it wasn't the same as we wrote it. And whatever.
And I think in the editing process to make it one voice, that's what happened. But that's why we have had the open editing process. I mean, I think since November and December, we've shared drafts. So, to the point you've made several times, there have been lots of opportunities
I missed it.
Yeah.
What am I going to tell you?
That's okay. I mean,
a little bit at the beginning. It's really not that, it's a big deal because it's changing the document, but it's helping. Like you said, it's a work in progress and it's building on it. So it needs to be said.
And I think, for me personally, like, I think the opportunity is in the presentation of it.
That too.
And I think that will be really important. And I think, which is something, we should talk about. And Tamisha, I see you've logged on, and I'm glad for it, because I think we're going to have to talk about the way we present this, the way we talk about it. I mean, the fact of it is we were always going to have a document to present to the community. This was always the end game. I think some of us entered this process with a clear idea that we would find some of the conclusions we found.
Can I ask a quick question? Steve? So who's the intended audience? Because you bring up a good point. who's the intended audience for this document? It makes a difference.
Well,
what you're saying.
ultimately, we're presenting it to the Board of Selectmen.
It's not a tourist guide. It's
No,
not like, this is a document that's going to, the town Board of Selectmen.
correct.
We're not painting a picture. I mean, we're telling it like it is, but if it's, we're not trying to paint a picture of something that it's not.
But I will say, I thought we had, and this leads into really where I wanted to go. I thought we had a fruitful discussion. I think while I may enter the conversation from a space of wanting to talk about systemic racism, Jason, you brought up the point last week, like that's triggering for some people. And I thought we had a good discussion last week about eliminating it and why, we're not looking for this document to shut people out. We're looking for this document as the impetus for continuing conversation. For
But
ongoing dialogue.
it's not going to it's not like a community where document. It's going to the Board of Selectmen for actionable, items.
Right. However, we know the issue that it is and that the community is going to be interested and invested. I was so Josh Labella from the Citizen and Hearst newspapers asked me about it. And I was really careful to convey the tone and tenor of our conversation from last time, because I thought some really good points were raised in terms of what the community response could be. And while, yes, Steve, very much to your point, this is about going to the Board of Selectmen. The community is going to be engaged and interested and invested and looking at this because of the nature of the issues we discuss.
I hope, yeah.
Tamisha brought up the point, it doesn't look good for Fairfield if we have the X, Y, and Z, but the fact of it is we all come to this from slightly different places. And when we talk about it, I think, I did not I was very careful to convey the tone and the tenor, as I started to say, of what we talked about last week. And because I did agree that ultimately it was important to be respectful of where people were at. Josh chose to include in the article systemic racism. It's not what I said. And I think that caused a response from some people that is very, concerning. So I just think we need to be mindful that when we're talking about this and presenting this, we personally may feel something or have a point of view, but when we're talking about where the group landed, it's not just about our own agenda of what might be. It really has to be respectful of where we all collectively landed.
I agree.
And I'm talking about this in the context of how we report to the Board of Selectmen, because yes, Steve, it is just for the administration, but it would be naive to think that, there isn't going to be the community isn't going to be invested in understanding what's in it. I mean, for instance, one of the comments on the article is, and I know you're not supposed to read comments, but one of the comments is, and there aren't many, but, Selectman Lefkowitz just called 60,000 people racist. No, I didn't. Not once did I call anybody racist. But that's what people are going to take away from it.
Of course they are.
I think that
Please, I invite them to show up at our meetings and, that's what I always do. Whenever somebody has a comment like that, it's like we meet, please stop in.
and even with this article, I think that, of course, I wasn't privy to our conversation last week since I wasn't on. And I did not replay it. I just knew that we had approved the document. So I was, anyway, but when Josh brings it up in this article, it's in the context of the recommendation for a proclamation, and the language in the blueprint, the rationale for that recommendation to make a proclamation talks about those proclamations and how important they are. In acknowledging the existence of systemic racism clears a path, right? So it's in that section. So out of context, anybody can take anything out of context. But if we referenced it as rationale for some of the steps, I just think that that's where it comes up in the article is in the context of a proclamation, which we looked up best practices, and that's important.
Right, but again, what we have had time to have these thoughtful discussions, and I say, and I'm playing devil's advocate because Karen, you know, where I stand on this. I
Yeah.
think that it's really important for us to be successful in our delivery of this document. You know, we don't want to shut the window where there are windows of opportunity. Some people are not going to be open to it. There are going to be people that read this, no matter what we say, who will say, oh, you just called 60,000 people racist. Like, if you've spent any time talking to this group or to me individually over the last 15 months, I've never said that. I don't feel it. I don't believe it. I don't think this is about individual meannesses or acts of racism. Do I think that there are systems and structures in place that we need to improve on so that the outcomes for minorities, people of color, BIPOC residents will be more equitable and more just? Yes, we've seen that. We've heard it. We've experienced it. Am I calling Fairfield a town of racists? No, I'm not. Do I
So
think?
back to my question, who's it go? It's going to the Board of Selectmen, and if we get lucky, it goes to the racial equity officer. They're not going to have time they want to know what's going on. They're not going to want to hear.
Right,
something.
but I also think that you also have to know that, let's remember that when we were talking about our charge, the question wasn't systemic racism exists here, now show us. It was, does systemic racism exist here? So I think there are going to be those people who really want to understand, and if we want to reach our audience, which includes the Board of Selectmen, and people have to buy in. So it's not ultimately just the Board of Selectmen. The community has to buy in and believe what we're sharing with them. So yes, our audience is the Board of Selectmen, but it doesn't stop at a body of three. It's ultimately has to be, as I said, battle tested through the community, because people will have to support putting it in the budget. So the audience is the community.
Then it's a different, it's a different, I mean, it's the community too, but it's a document that we want somebody to be able to pick up and use as a blueprint, right? Moving forward. So some of the stuff I thought, what you're saying as a task force, I thought we got past it, but last week I heard from a couple of people that sounded like we didn't. So the point is, either we're going to have to get past it, or you're going to keep explaining to everybody. You're never going to get there. So I thought we proved it by listing projects and best practices. If we don't accept that we proved it, then we're going to spend all our time trying to prove it. And we've already done that. I mean, Karen, you know what I mean? It's, it can't be both ways.
I feel like I might have said this to you. Or somebody, maybe it was my husband. I live in the world of market research consulting, and I have done consumer research where I have found out whether consumers are, users of a certain product or non-users of a certain product. Bear with me for the analogy. And at the end of the day, if a company wants to know, what's in the way of increased sales, and I tell them, for example, well, here are all the problems with your product that are in the way of sales. I make recommendations, and it's up to them to take them or leave them. But I've done my job, which is make the recommendations based on what I've heard. And that is what we have done. We've completed our work. We've created a document that summarizes our work, and we are presenting a blueprint. If they don't like what it says, well, that is unfortunate. But our job, what we've been accountable for, is doing the work and then sharing it out. And we've worked really hard to do that. If they don't have ears to hear and they don't act upon our recommendations, that is out of our control. What we've been able to control is what we've done. And what I believe the group agreed to kind of its culmination last week. And this week, our work is really to discuss an action plan for how to present it, a week from Monday. So I understand that there's been some concerns maybe voiced to you guys. I haven't heard any. So of course we can talk about those, but I don't know that changes where we are at this point in the process, because we have a document that we've agreed upon that we're going to present. And I think that whether I don't know the specific points that Steve is concerned about. I feel like, maybe we do have sort of an addendum of it being a document that can be living and breathing by the next standing committee, hopefully, or body that takes on the fruition of our work, and an individual that takes on the fruition of our work, because things will always be changing, but that would be part of our presentation, perhaps. I just don't know whether we need to do anything differently other than proceed as charged for the next week and a half to get something to put in front of the Board of Selectmen, unless I'm not understanding something.
Unless you're not understanding.
I'm just wondering am I not understanding what we're here to do at this point forward, which is come up with our plan for our presentation?
Correct.
So yeah, there's going to be people that are pissed, and there's going to be people that don't like the language, and there's going to be people that don't like the work. We've known that since day one. We also received an email, from somebody who's like, I want that job. So there's going to be people who are excited about the work so much so that they want to be a part of it. There's probably going to be people raising their hands to be on whatever next body we can get. So we're never going to please everybody. We are hopefully going to please some people. So I think, if we all understand that, if we all understand kind of where we're at, maybe that's enough. And we keep going through the challenging last week and a half of what we're here to do.
And, Steve, I would further echo that. I just want to, again, reiterate, this has been an open process for these past many months, the editing, the discussing, the agreed upon language. So yes, in the 11th hour, is it frustrating that we are having some of these discussions that were heretofore agreed upon? It is, because we are having to spend some time nuancing and massaging, even within this group, places where I thought we had arrived. However, we have now arrived. We have agreed upon document. We do have to come up with a plan, to Karen's point. And if you are not wanting to be part of that presentation, that's fine, but we do need people to present it or not. I mean, it's really up to the group. The fact of it is that we were always going to have a blueprint to deliver. And so now in the final step of that, it can be delivered without anybody talking about it. Do I think that would be a shame? Absolutely. Do I hope that there are at least 2 of you who want to come before the Board of Selectmen on the 31st? It's been confirmed. I really hope so, because I think that the devil here is going to be in the details of talking about it. I mean, do I think it stands alone? Yes. Does it mean anything if the administration doesn't act on any of it? Well, I hope that it's been meaningful for all of you and some of the individuals that we've touched. And I hope that we've learned some things. And I hope this is the beginning of a lot of good work for all of us. So, but
in the spirit of best practices, for what is the most effective for presenting for the Board of Selectmen? Just get handed in, or do?
No, I would hope that a couple of us, a couple of you, it won't be me because I am at the board table. Talk about some of the, we've had 15 months of a lot of work. I think the group should be very proud of that work. And I think people need to understand that this is, as I said in the beginning, the impetus, the framework for more discussions to come.
What's the amount of time?
that we have to present?
Usually, yeah, about,
I
yeah,
mean,
more, 10 minutes.
There's no set time. I mean, I think keeping it simple, talking a high level, talking about our process. Karen gave an update to the Board of Selectmen a couple months ago, and it was perfect. It was like, this is what we've done. This is where we're at. This is our hope as a group, whether it's,
So it's not a PowerPoint presentation, you just
no,
want
no,
to
no, it's
talk
really
about it.
like, I don't think so, because I think the document is what it is. I think that we talk about the 5 priority recommendations based on best practices that, I think all the things we've talked about
Yes,
that,
we'll work together and outline something, but yeah.
right,
I think we should
so
do that together. As a matter of
Is
fact, we
there-
can start that document.
is anybody stepping up to do that?
I'll step up to start the document.
Yeah, but we really do, we really need to get off this phone with an understanding of who is going to present.
I have said all along, I will certainly, present. I think it would be meaningful if it were more than just one person presenting for an entire task force. I would love to share the role with somebody else. I would hope that we would all attend at the very least, but there are going to be areas that I don't have all of the backstory on. Kind of the way we even divided up the document is I actually didn't take a section. I kind of was on the framework and not really in the nitty gritty of anything. So I would definitely, it would be beneficial for all of us if I was not the sole presenter.
Nancy, is it a present and then answer questions? Can everybody if we're all there, can we all answer the question? Not just
Yeah,
have-
or make comments. I mean, I think that in
Right.
an ideal world, everybody here shows up and adds a comment about what their piece of it is, what their hope, what their work has been, what their findings have been.
Okay.
And again, remembering that you may come to this, and sometimes I say things and I couch them and I'm really careful about how I say them, because we all have to remember we're representing a group. And as we saw last week, there are different levels of comfort in terms of what people are willing to say and not say. And so I think we just have to be very mindful that not everyone is going to be at the same, anyone that is presenting, I would just caution, like, not everyone is going to be where you are personally, whatever that means. So sticking to the facts, sticking to our findings, sticking to what we agreed on is going to be essential. This is, again, regardless how we frame it, we have to remember that there are people who are going to be listening or reading, and their whole takeaway is, I just called 60,000 people racist.
Don't read.
I'm just saying, but I think it's an important thing to remember. I'm not taking that personally.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Because I think it's like missing the point, but I think people miss the point.
That's why I asked the question. If we're going to spend time worrying about that, then that's missing the point.
Well, it's not a worry as much as it is a sensitivity and a reminder that we want to be effective here. The point is not to be right. The point is to be effective in delivering our message.
To the Board of Selectmen, not to the Fairfield patch.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct, but knowing that regardless of how you say something.
Yeah, so if I said what you said, would it be racist?
Well, what was saying
Whatever you
what?
said.
I was,
Whatever you said, if I said it, would it be racist? Probably not, right? So then it isn't, so don't worry about it.
except for,
You said it.
no, well, I
Yes.
mean, listen, the fact of it is, no matter what we said in this kind of blueprint, there are people that are gonna say it, whether you say it or I say it.
Not if I say it. I'll do it with you, Karen.
Thank you, Steve. But I still urge caution here, because the fact
I
is,
am. I'm the most cautious guy sitting in this room right now.
the point is that we want to represent a 15-month process. We
I'm-
want to
I'm proud
represent
of it.
what is reflected in the
Okay, I
document.
won't do it. I won't do it.
No, yes, you will. I heard you say you will.
I heard you,
Oh,
Will, Steve. You said it and we voted. All in favor?
But everybody's
Steve-
got to have input on the document that we're going to circulate.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, if Steve and Nancy, Steve and I are able to have a conversation, just the two of us, about how we will present, how best to present this
And-
information.
And what I'm
Well-
gonna say is, don't share a document if you have thoughts and specific things outside of what we've talked about that you want to make sure, and you yourself will not be comfortable showing up at the meeting and saying them. Please either email me or email Steve and Karen, and then that way we can avoid the FOIA issues.
Yeah, I think if Steve and I have a conversation about how we can do this, what works best for he and I, and everybody comes to the meeting prepared to speak to the section that they worked on and the importance of it, and some of the questions that we might get might stem for those specific areas. I'm not sure, but I would definitely go on. For me personally, what I was saying earlier is these are our recommendations based on 15 months of work, and listening and discussing and learning and
Right.
active engagement in this space, right? This is what we've done. And this is what we are presenting. It is going to be in their hands what they do next. Will we be judged for the work we did? Perhaps, but we did really good work in really important space, and people may not like the things they hear, but we know that that's what happens in this space, right? It's making people take a look at things that they don't want to look at or think about. It was simpler for a lot of people when we weren't bringing this up, but that's not going to move us forward. So I feel like I feel like we're going to be able to do this, especially Steve. I think with you being there with me, I think it will speak volumes. But we have a little chat. Hold on, folks. We have a chat.
We want to know, Doug, Jamie wants to know if Doug wants to, if we should include Doug too.
I
Nancy?
think that'd be great.
I've asked him and he's willing.
Yeah.
All right.
So Steve, maybe the three of us then.
right.
If
We'll top
he's
it up. We'll do it in sections and it'll be straightforward.
fantastic, I think that's, totally doable. Thank you, Jamie.
So, great, let's vote on that plan. I would just say that anyone that is talking about it, promoting it, supporting it, again, please remember that you are representing a group. You are not speaking for yourself. Tamisha, did you want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, before we voted, I just wanted to make a motion to consider before we vote on
Okay,
the.
Yep. Yep.
So do I have a second?
Well, what's the motion?
What's the motion?
The motion is to consider my vote on the initial blueprint.
We haven't voted on
That's
it.
not what we're voting on.
Sorry, we voted.
No, we voted last week. So here's the thing, because of the article that came out yesterday, and I was not in agreement with how it was portrayed, especially as Nancy shared that systemic racism came up in the body of the text. I want to retract my vote
Okay.
for the blueprint.
Okay,
you
I
know,
understand. I mean, here's what I'll say. So I don't think that we need to vote as a group on that. If you want to just withdraw your name, I understand. What I will say, and you know, I honor and hear you. So if you want to do that, obviously, what I will say is we are not going to be able to control what is said and written about the blueprint as we're discussing. The language and the content has not changed. And that is what we voted on last week, which we all agreed on. And if you've changed your mind, you know, as a person of free will, I honor that. But we are not going to be able to control what is said. You know, that when a man takes away and hears, I've said this, when those words didn't come out of my mouth, I can't control that. So
I'd like to make
I
a
want to
motion
know,
that-
how did Josh get the
I'd like to
article?
make a motion that
get the
I'd like to
blueprint.
make a motion that Tamisha wants to change her vote because she read something in the newspaper that Nancy said. All right, I was
Okay.
gonna get that on the record.
Steve,
Please, please.
how did he get that notion?
Yeah,
He read the,
I thought we weren't supposed to share that document. That was a
Mhm.
confidential document.
no, first of all, the document, he read it after the fact, because after we spoke, after the group, no, I can tell you the timing. After the group met and voted on it, this has all been public record, first of all. So once it became public record last week, when we put it up, it had been confidential until last week when we voted on it and talked about it, and it became public record. So once we voted on it and it had the unanimous support of the group, I sent it to the chief of police. I sent it to the town attorney. I sent it to Josh, and I sent it to other people who, like Mark Barnhart has seen it, because it's also, now it's available on our website. So Josh had called me about it and said he wanted to do an article. So I spoke to him. As careful as I am being in what I'm conveying to you now, I would say I was twice as careful, if there's such a thing, to be to honor what we talked about as a group last week. I have no interest in shutting the door on conversations. This is, as I said to Josh, it's supposed to be the impetus for further conversations. It is not the path, it is a path, all the things. He asked specifically about the recommendations, and I used the language as adopted. I never said anything about systemic racism, although Karen, to your point, it is in the document. It is not the only place it exists is not in that proclamation language that we changed. It is for people who are doing work in the equity, in the racial equity and justice space. It is a term that exists. I did not make it up. I did not hand it to Josh. I simply told him what our recommendations were and how we were very careful to arrive, and that language matters. His choice. I did not give him that language. So
can I just ask, sort of to what Steve was just saying, and I don't know about process here, because I don't know if we're in the middle of a motion and this is not okay, but Tamisha, let me just clarify. You approved the document last week, but now because of something that somebody else said, you don't approve of it anymore, or you don't?
No, I
approve of the
don't. I
article?
don't approve of the term systemic racism. So if the context of the body of work is pointing towards that, I cannot co-sign it. That's
But
what I'm saying.
you have
That's
been,
all right, Karen, that's fine. We have one
no,
that doesn't.
Steve, please let Karen finish and let's talk this through and
I just want to understand, because
Because you weren't here last week.
yeah, I wasn't exactly. So I wasn't here. So I didn't, and I apologize. I didn't hear this conversation. So I am putting together things in my mind. But Tamisha, but you've seen the document. We've reviewed the document as a group. You were involved in writing parts of it. So it wasn't new. It surprises me if it was news to you that was in there and on any level, because we've all been working with it, massaging it for months. So I guess that's just my worry is a reaction to what somebody in the media, how somebody in the media kind of
No,
interpreted
it has nothing
that
to the
language.
media.
I
It
just
has
don't know,
nothing
what-
to
you know,
do
why
with the
last
media.
week you would have voted yes, and then this week you're saying, nope, never
Well,
mind.
last week I had the same sentiments around that word.
She doesn't
slash
believe
term.
there's systemic racism in Fairfield, Karen. She doesn't, that's the point. So she doesn't want to see it in any. No, you can't change your vote because you heard it in the newspaper, but she just wants to change her vote.
So,
'cause she heard it in
so here's the thing, the procedurally, the vote stands. She is able to withdraw support because certainly we want people to enter this, the next phase of this final phase. And Tamisha does not have to come out and support it. I would ask that you put it in writing that you want your name withdrawn from support, but I would echo that it is surprising based on all the months of discussion, but that's okay. This is not, I'm not here to try to argue a point or make it so. But I will point out that people are going to interpret things in the media. What hasn't changed is the content of the document.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
people interpret it is going to be, we cannot control that.
Yeah.
It is going to be out there and people are going to have a response to it. So the hope is that we have all signed on to something that we can stand behind. If you've had a change of heart, you've had a change of heart. And I don't want to be in the business of trying to convince otherwise. If the work itself hasn't convinced you, I can't do a better job. And so with that, I would just, sorry, I'm not getting choked up on dry. Although certainly passionate about this, I would say, I will reiterate this point and beat this dead horse. People are going to have a response to this document. The content of it has not changed since last week. People are going to say all kinds of things. If you're not comfortable with that, that's on you as an individual. I can't make it so. So, you know, I certainly want to hear from other people, but at this point, I don't personally, as a co-chair, want to be in the business of trying to convince any one of you. If the work itself doesn't convince you,
Yeah.
okay, then I think we all have work to do collectively as a community. And I would like to be part of that ongoing dialogue. But in terms of this piece of it and this phase and this stage, we're there. We've done that work. So the focus really should be for those of us that want to stand by it, knowing that there are going to be people who say things.
So let me ask this just to kind of get us back. So Tamisha, there's a process for her to put in writing that she's revoking her vote, I suppose.
This is news to me. I don't know how it
Right.
is. If she wants her name, Tamisha, if you want your name off the document as a task force member, I think, I don't know what the right answer is. So I certainly will get back to you. I hear you saying that you don't want to support it as it is based on, I think, the fact that someone in the media said what they said or interpreted as they did, because the content of the document has not changed.
Okay, so Nancy, may I make a suggestion? I think maybe Tamisha would like to resign. And that would be much easier and simpler instead of saying, I don't support the document, but it's just,
Well, basically, that's what she's doing by not supporting the
yeah,
document.
so it's basically much cleaner. And that's fine. And that's okay. But we knew that. The heat is just turned on. It's just turned on. And it's all, the people over here need to understand that. The heat has just turned on. It's just getting a little warm.
Yeah.
It's going to get a lot hotter. So this is not about one. It is when it's going to get that hot. When are you going to say you're going to leave? So let's have that conversation. Let's resign. Whoever needs to cannot take it. It's much better this whole thing is, well, I want to withdraw my name. That doesn't make sense. You just say, I resign.
Yeah.
It's much
If
cleaner.
the work that we've done doesn't, if you don't, if you're not on board with what we've done for the last 15 months, it sort of makes sense that you're just
It's
not
much
on.
cleaner. It's much easier for everyone. It's much cleaner. It's an end. It's, it's closure. Closure for
Jason.
everyone.
Jason, you're gonna say something?
No, Annie, I think I understand your intentions for that statement. It just sounds like we're very close to the end of our mission as a task force, and, you know, resigning, not resigning, Tamisha, I'm not sure what's required here, if you're gonna on board or not on board with the blueprint as you
I don't
agreed
need
to
to
last week.
resign. I don't need to resign to disagree with a document. I did
Yeah.
put in the work,
That's what I wanted
and
to say.
I
like,
believe there's work to be done. That doesn't mean because I disagree, I'm not allowed in the
Right.
committee. That makes no
and-
sense to me.
And
Yeah.
I feel similarly to Misha, because I feel like while it would, ultimately the end result is this blueprint, and that was always the fact of it. It is still passing because it passed. And so we have a document that is supported, and it was always going to be majority rule. And is it nice if we all agree? Yes, but that was never the mandate to all agree. We had to have majority agree. And, you know, I'm sorry. I feel sorry that.
Don't feel
No,
sorry.
I do, because I think what's going to happen, as Annie said, the heat is coming on, and I think we're going to have outside pressures. And the fact is, it is so triggering just to even say these words. And that is a very sorrowful experience for me, that we can't even put some of these thoughts down for people to consider, that it is so triggering that it launches into, and Tamisha, I'm not saying your name calling, into people name calling, and the heat that we're talking about, and this sense of like, oh my God, am I going to be the target of something terrible? And the fact is, we can't have these honest conversations because this work needs to be done, because we need to examine some of these systems, because we need to continue this work. So for me, it is a sorrowful experience. I am sorry for it, because it just highlights how far we still need to come. We don't need to talk about having unanimous support at the Board of Selectmen table, and you can, you know, you're going to be able to speak as you all want. Again, the content of what we've written, that we've been stress testing over 15 months, language we've agreed on, it's going to make people uncomfortable,
Should we,
but they're just recommendations. We're
Could-
literally not saying anything other than these are best practices. Look at this. Literally, this document could sit in a drawer, and still that is somehow so triggering for people and scary. We're not posting it on our economic development website, to your point, Steve. This is to use, yeah,
and Kathy has her hand up.
go ahead, Kathy.
I just wanted to say I was in a different meeting of similar to this a couple days ago, and different opinions were expressed as to whether or not something was systemic racism and whether or not someone had experienced it. And one of the things that the facilitator said, which I thought was really helpful, was, although this person, you have said that you did not experience this, that is your experience. And I honor that that was your experience. And that's great that you didn't experience that. However, the majority over here did experience this. So we need to honor that. And I think that's what the document does. There may be people who are going to read it and say, this never happened to me in Fairfield. I never felt anything like this. I never saw this. But as the findings showed, like Nancy keeps saying, the data and the findings, as the findings show, that's what really is going to, you know, explain what's happening. So I think that's a distinction that can be helpful. Just because you didn't experience it doesn't mean it's not happening. Just because someone didn't experience it doesn't mean it's not happening.
You can put your hand down.
Once I figure out how to do that, I'll do that.
We could we just make a note in the minutes?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. I think we should make a note in the minutes that Tamisha has retracted her support.
Yeah, a desire to, I'll just put that she's expressed a desire to withdraw her vote to support the blueprint. due to language in the blueprint.
In the
I think it
newspaper,
was due to
But yeah,
language in the newspaper.
yes.
Hey, Tamisha, can I ask, is
The
that?
way it was
is- are-
portrayed in the
af-
media is my understanding. Jason, go ahead.
Just after we've had this discussion, Tamisha, is that really what your intention is to do? I just want to be clear. Based on the article, you want to withdraw your vote for the blueprint.
It's not based on the article alone.
That's the only thing.
Because
that's
the blueprint doesn't speak to systematic racism. The article does.
Yeah.
But I thought
But-
the article was using references from our blueprint. So I
No,
don't know
Why would
what
you think that?
blueprint,
Why would you think that anything you read in
Josh,
the newspaper is gonna be true?
because it was hand delivered to him by the task force.
No, just quickly, Steve. So
So-
Tamisha, to be clear, the author in the article used
Mhm.
his own language to describe the blueprint. In that he used systematic racism. So that's what happened, and that's what I think we've been trying to do as a group to explain to you that those are two separate things: the author's language and what the blueprint is actually contains. So I'm just trying to understand: are you clearly withdrawing your vote for the blueprint based on what the article said?
Yes, because the term, so there's a term of systems and systemic, which are seeming to mean the same thing. And until that's outlined, that systems does not mean systemic, then I have to retract. So I don't,
Okay,
it's
then
a
that's
play on
fine.
words
I
for
don't think
me.
that that's fine, and I respect your decision. I think everybody else has said they respect that, and I just wanted to understand that clearly. So
Thanks,
thank you.
Jason.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And
So we can add that to the minutes, right? And keep moving.
So then do we go back to where we were, which was acting on next steps, which was
Yeah.
basically,
But I just want to put closure on this, and then thank you. I'm going to, because I really think that at the end of this, we're now, everyone is tired. People are going to interpret it how they do. The fact of it is, the language is the language. I think if you feel strongly about sentences or things that you want to convey in the presentation of it, to make sure that the interpretation is as you want it to be, please email either me or Steve or Karen. When
Doug.
talking to,
yeah.
when you are talking to press or friends or posting on Facebook, I remind you and I encourage you that you are, if you are making generalizations about the blueprint, you are speaking for the task force, or make it clear that you're speaking for yourself. But if you're speaking for the task force, you want to represent and convey the conversations as we've had them, because there is nuance and subtlety here. So
And did
with
you
that,
say Josh was on the call last week?
he was not on the call. He listened to it.
He
and read
listened to the
blueprint.
recording. So this came up last week.
I think he listened to it. I'm not sure if he listened to it, but he should have.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we.
Anyway, I'm going to make a motion that,
No, just Nancy, hold on. We went through this whole thing about systematic racism and we picked the language. And everybody agreed that we wouldn't use that word and we used the language. And that's fine. My question, I would request, I think, let's just take a couple of minutes for every one of us just to think about it and deep down think, are we comfortable with the language of the blueprint? Because it would be, it's quite shaking that if we are at the same position next week again with some other team members deciding to drop off. So let's, we're having this, let's all look at within ourselves and say, no matter what, are we ready to stand by this document? We've had,
Now we're talking about next week.
We've had ample time to look it over, and things, and people, we cannot control what people said, as Nancy has said. So just
next
take a moment.
week, if we do have a meeting, we may not, because the fact of it is, at this point, we are presenting. So likely we're not even going to be having a meeting next week, just for your own schedules. And if we meet again after, it's just to do a recap of what the presentation was. So this is our moment. I would like to make a motion to have Steve, Doug, and Karen present to the Board of Selectmen. They're going to work on their own. If you have any, the motion is to have Steve, Karen, and Doug present to the Board of Selectmen on January 31st.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Aye.
volunteers. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.
And anyone that can be there, I encourage you to be there.
I'll be there.
Anyone has anything to make sure, as I said, please email them or me.
I mean, maybe we should have a meeting next week and just kind of talk about what we're gonna present. And can we just have like a final document?
This is the document we're gonna send, the blueprint is the blueprint.
Yeah, but
Everybody's confident-
you said that people have been editing it and.
No, they were editing. We voted on the final document last week. It was sent out to with this agenda as the
Yeah.
final PDF. It actually is gonna change because some links changed, but other than that, the content has not changed. The editing was open for 6 weeks.
Okay,
It's-
I got it. No, if that's a document, that's a document. That's fine. So Karen, we're all working on this off the same document and yeah, I just want to make sure that,
Yeah, it's the one that was attached with the agenda today.
Yeah.
For today. That's the one to work off of. It's also on the website under the supporting materials, the only one there, and it says adopted 1/6/22. So you can reference it there also.
Again, to your point, people have to either get comfortable or not get comfortable, but the fact of it is, we always had a document to deliver. Here we are. So Steve, I don't
Yeah.
want to I don't want to get back into a discussion next week. If someone's not comfortable, then they'll have to find a way to either make peace or move on. I don't know what to say. Like, that ship sailed. So, respectfully, I received, Tamisha, we hear you. It's been noted in the minutes. And understood. I think that people are going to interpret this how they do, and that we have no control over. Anyone else want to say anything, commit?
no, but I do, I mean it when I ask you, if I said those words, that was a question. Maybe you have the answer, Annie, or if I said those words that you said, because they're words in the paper, would they be racist?
Yes.
No, they would be, to a point, yes, and they would be saying, oh, they always believe that. And they want always to have an equal say. That's the belief they're going to carry, and there's nothing we can do to change it.
So there wouldn't be anything wrong with it if I said it.
No, absolutely not.
All right, well,
Absolutely not. But it's because the person who's writing it is not prepared to listen to the fact that there are people who feel differently because of their lived experience of a person who is of a different color gets treated differently, because it's hard to take that. So it's much easier to put down a person who is already said, okay, you matter less. That's what it is. You matter less. So it's something so ingrained in us we don't even know it. And part of it is that we're so grateful. People of color are so grateful that we're not being lynched, that we have these, or we can live in nice houses, our children can go to nice schools. We are grateful for that. We don't think it's our right as yet. We know it intellectually, but we don't know it in the heart. We don't act from the place. So we already portray ourselves in that position without us even knowing it, because we have had years of being told, our ancestors are in our DNA, we are not good enough. It's going to take multiple generations, multiple, if that. So it's not something which is easy, and it is not something which people who haven't lived in that color to know that. It's also not easy but it's very different when you're in Africa, right? And I say this to you, Steve, is because when you're in Africa, where there are communities who haven't been touched by colonialism, they are very different people. Their experience is very different. They look and act and walk and talk in a very different manner. So it's this years of that which we are trying bit by bit to change. Every generation is getting much better. I see it in my generation. What I am and what my children are, that it's huge. What they expect their right, I would not even consider it my right. So hopefully their children will be, and that's what it is. When you look at it in the generations, think about your parents. How did they think and how you are thinking and how your child is thinking?
Me, you still talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
Yeah. I didn't have parents. I had a mother, but yeah, I hear you.
So it's the same thing. You ask any colored person to trace what their families have been through, and your grandmother, mine, we would never. My mother, when she came here, she said, "How can you talk to a white person like that? I would never speak to somebody like that, a white person." I said, because it's conditioning. Right?
I never had any grandparents. So nobody told me how to speak. I guess that's probably why I am the way.
Which is a good thing.
Thanks.
Okay. So this is a really complicated, heavy topic, which, and the team has really worked hard. We've all worked very hard. Hopefully we've learned a few things, but what has been really, that we've been able to reach across the aisle, even when it's been really tough. Last week was tough. We've been able to come to an agreement, and we want to end with a good note, with a happy note.
And,
right?
to that point, I think the fact of it is what we also need to convey is somehow this conversation, because the fact of it is the document was agreed on. We had really good discussion. We made changes based on people's various input and levels of comfort and got to a place in the document. So since it's not the document that Tamisha has identified as a problem, it's the response to it. I think that there's a way to talk about that when we're presenting, because the fact of it is the document, which has not changed, was supported unanimously. So I guess I would want to understand, is now there a change of heart in supporting the document, or is it because you've just had a change of heart, Tamisha, and I know Sandra feels the same way, or is it that you don't like the response and you want to be able to explain to people that that's not the intention? Because I think we need to think about that in terms of our presenting. So just,
Sandra didn't have a change of heart. She has the same heart.
well,
It didn't change one way or another.
in terms of last week, she voted on it, and then we heard separately that, she felt similarly because of the article. So,
But that
she's
was her
not here.
original. That was her original position. That's what I'm saying.
But she voted to support the document, and I think
Right.
now she is.
So she
having-
wants to change because of newspaper article too?
She's not here to defend her position, so I can't.
But I mean, you said you had a side conversation.
Well, email,
So is that official?
in that she made a statement that she doesn't want to support it because of the way it was portrayed in the media, but
So that's your point, Karen. I mean, we already agreed on all this, and now
no, but the
Something about the
document, that's
newspaper.
what my point is. So I
that
think
was my original point.
in the intention, in the telling of the story of this blueprint, I think that that's where we need to stay focused.
I think Karen would be able to talk about that, Karen. Karen, I think you should be able to tell that story. It's because
Which
it's a
one?
compelling story
Which
I
one?
think I
that
can-
even when you have agreed at a certain point, and it's how uncomfortable it is
Yeah.
to change. It is really, yeah.
And I
And
think
that's
that,
why the masses don't speak up.
Yeah.
because it is really hard.
Yeah.
And the ones who do speak get flanked, get persecuted. I mean, you have every, the police on you, you have everything. Everything is thrown at you.
I think for me and for anybody who's listening who wavers, I say the most heartening thing, and I wish we could get to this because it's so important, is that we've been invited to the police interviews once again, because our police department wants our help for a more equitable hiring process. To me, that's a perfect example of what we've been working for. Is once again, they reached out and said, hey, would people from your task force like to join us? Even though our task force is about to kind of expire, the police is inviting us in because they want a better system. I love that. And that to me is why I'm so very proud of
And
what we've done.
sidebar,
So,
if someone
yeah.
wants to be part of that, please reach out to me
Please.
separately, because we have to get back to Detective Esposito about that. So task force member, ad hoc member, if you're interested in being part of that process in any way, please email me like in the next day or two.
It was an amazing experience when I did it. It was amazing for me to go in as a white woman with the lens that I had, and then to talk to Gina, who talked to me about some of the things that I experienced my first day that I thought I didn't even think of that. I wish I had talked to you before this, and the way I reacted to different people and the expectations I had for different people. It was incredibly eye-opening and rewarding, and also really gratifying to see how hard our police department's working. So I think anybody here, reach out to Nancy. It is well worth a day of your life to see kind of what they're hoping to do within that department. So really amazing. And I talked to Gina, and she said she'd be willing to talk to anybody in advance because I had said, I wish I had talked to you, kind of had a primer the day before I went, not the day after I went, because anyway, it was an extraordinary process. So really reach out, and to anybody listening, reach out to Nancy and say, yes, I'd love to do that, because it was a heartening experience. Anyway, I just needed to say that, Nancy, because I didn't want us to get off this call without.
No, I think it's
Yeah.
important to note. So anyone else have any comments, thoughts, anything they want to add? Yeah, Jamie.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Innie, I'm glad you're going to be at the meeting. I think your personal experience and stories, it's very moving. That makes a difference. And also I was thinking in terms of Tamisha, the phrase systemic racism, I think is the stumbling point. But Tamisha, I'm sure there's a lot of things in the report that you support. And it would just be, it would be nice to hear from you about that, because I know you've worked on this committee for all this time. So there's a lot of good in there. I'd hate it to be kind of all because of a phrase. That's all I want.
It's not a phrase for me. Like, things aren't gray for me. My world is very black and white, and I can't co-sign 99% or 99% of good, and there's that 1% that's not good.
But Tamisha, the document hasn't changed. So you signed on something based on language that we all agreed on.
Systems, and I mean, I blame myself, because at the end of the night, I was exhausted with all the conversations we had, and not realizing the root of systemic is systems. So now Josh's article pointing it out, and I actually emailed Josh to get an understanding of why he chose to put in systemic racism in his article. And he pointed to that same line that I did not feel comfortable with from the beginning of last week's discussion. And he pointed out systemic and systems. So the very thing that I was uncomfortable with last discussion resurfaced, and I just feel, disappointed in myself for not realizing, the cunningness of the language. So I fault myself, but now I know And now I can say I'm retracting my vote from the document.
I mean, I'm just thinking, but Tamisha, I'm sure there's a lot of, I think you worked on a section, so.
Yeah, I did. I
Yeah.
did. I didn't
So
say the
I'm sure there's a
entire
lot of
document,
support.
but that's the thing. I can't half support and then say, okay, I support everything else, but this.
I'm gonna
Because-
just take issue with the word cunning for a moment, because I think that's really.
It was crafty. The wording was crafty. It's tricky.
But just to be clear,
And
it implies subterfuge and sneakiness when it's all been out there. So I appreciate that you're saying you didn't catch on to it last week, but this has been out there for weeks. And first of all, we adopted language in February. So to say cunning, I just would ask you in return to be careful, because it's implying something, intention, that
but I feel it was
not fair
intentional.
to the group. No, the group has tried to come up collectively with language that made everybody comfortable. That was the point of that conversation last week. So I would just encourage you to be mindful, because that, I think, is hurtful to the group dynamic and also not fairly representing what we were trying to achieve as a group.
Well,
I
there's
feel like
nothing cunning about the nature of what we're doing. I mean, everything's right in your face. So the fact that you're suggesting that it's cunning because you read it in the newspaper should tell you, after we've been in your face for 15 months, should tell you that there's something odd about the newspaper article. I've been sitting here for 15 months, and now this is coming out cunning. Maybe there's something the newspaper guy wrote, because these guys have been saying the same thing for 15 months.
Well, if he interpreted that way, I'm sure everyone's going to interpret it that way, because systems.
All right.
systemic-
I move that we move on. Nancy, this has been an hour,
Yeah.
15 minutes.
I understand, listen, but I think it's fair that
But
everybody.
you
has a
asked the
chance-
question,
I
Steve.
did.
You
did.
interrogated me.
Last
So,
week we did this for an hour, 15 minutes.
okay,
too.
so why can't
gonna
my
go off.
choices
Just-
be
Steve,
get off.
respected?
Steve,
Just
Steve,
be
point of
respectful,
order.
Steve.
Excuse me, point of order. I'd ask everybody to please take a deep breath. Tamisha, I did ask you a question, or I pointed something out, and I appreciate you hearing me. And I don't necessarily think it's back and forth. I'm just asking you to please be thoughtful and mindful about your interpretation about what happened, because I don't think that's an accurate depiction of what's happened these 15 months. And certainly as we are crafting the language, which has been open and available, and we have had these discussions specifically around this language since February. So I don't have too much to say on that, except I hope you do come to a place where, to Jamie's point, there are things that you find in it that are great. And if you can't get behind it in your own, as we move forward, the fact is, there was good discussion last week. We landed where we are. We cannot control what happens. If someone has something else to say on a new subject, I will hear it. But other than that, I'm just going to say that we should wrap this up. But is there anyone else that would like to make a comment who we have not heard from? Okay, so again, reiterate, please get any language that you would like to Steve. And perhaps we will see you next week. We're going to talk through what we might have for an agenda next week, which may just be talking about more about how we do the presentation, but we will stick specifically to that. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you,
Second.
Annie. Steve
Second.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions or noes? All right. Thank you all very much.